Hello, this is Bedtime Lemon, and I'm here to read you a bedtime story to help you sleep. Turn this on, relax, do your bedtime routine, and use my voice in this story to put your active mind into a restful state. Tonight I'll be reading to you The Guardians of Lore by Daniel Errico. I do not own any rights to this story, and you can find it on freechildrenstories.com. Now get ready, relax, and have a restful night. Chapter 1 Boy Meets Frog. The first time that I saw the frog, I was sitting in class. Its face was pressed up to the window next to me from the outside. I had been drawing in my notebook, but once I noticed it, I couldn't stop looking. It couldn't stop looking at me either. If it had been a staring contest, I would have lost. Maybe frogs blinked, but with its big eyes smushed against the glass, this one didn't. Stagwood Forest was just beyond the schoolyard, and it was riddled with frogs, but they always avoided people. I knew right away, in a way that I can think better than I can say, that this frog was different. Miss Weaver hadn't noticed. She'd been my teacher for a few months and was known for having a stack of black hair that rose a foot above her head. Before the school year started, I had heard rumors about her, and within a week I realized that they were all true. For one thing, she wore the same outfit every day. The colors changed, but she always had on striped pants and a striped jacket. For one thing, she was mind-numbingly boring. The kind of boring that makes your eyes shut without your permission. Part of the problem was that all she liked to tell were pointless stories instead of teaching. She was obsessed with telling stories about former students who had become famous. The first couple of times weren't bad, even kind of interesting, but by the second week of school, she'd already started repeating herself, just like with her outfits. I knew all the stories by heart. The professional football player who was good at math, the politician who was a teacher's pet. I knew every word. Instead of listening, I spent most of class drawing. I drew imaginary places and designed creatures to fill them. Every drawing had a story, but not that day. I had barely gotten started when the frog appeared and changed my life forever. I tried to listen back into Miss Weaver, just in time to hear the end of her story about Martin Shandles, the now famous comedian. Martin had transferred schools halfway through the year, so I always felt like that one shouldn't count. We were supposed to be learning long division, but something had reminded her of Martin. I knew exactly what bad joke she would end the story with, and much less about long division. Whenever he acted up in class, I'd say, "We've got a real comedian on our hands, don't we?" And I was right, she said with a giggle. I was sure Miss Weaver would see the frog eventually, but she didn't. Nobody did. When I looked again to see if it was still there, I noticed something shiny. It made me forget all about class and Miss Weaver and Martin Shandles. There was no denying it. The frog had put on a tiny pair of glasses. I wanted to lecture it, to explain that frogs don't wear glasses. It bothered me that it didn't already know that. On top of that, it had been staring at me for at least 5 minutes. It seemed like it was bordering on rude. Could a frog even be rude? I wasn't sure, but the bigger question was, why was it so interested in me? I wasn't the type of kid who got attention. Teachers always wrote, "needs to participate more" on my report cards, with a smiley face to make my parents feel better. I never got into trouble and barely ever stood out on purpose. A few years earlier, I accidentally peed my pants because my zipper had gotten stuck in the bathroom at the last moment. I tried to convince everyone that I'd fallen into a puddle at recess. The custodian, Mr. Salazar, charged outside with a mop and brought me to find the puddle. My guess is that we wasted an hour looking around at the gravel. My mom dropped off some new clothes, and nobody really noticed my wardrobe changed, or that it hadn't rained in weeks. That's how it was. Whether I did something spectacular or sneezed myself out of a chair, nobody cared. And almost nobody said my name. As far as school was concerned, all those things happened to some kid. So why would a frog with glasses jump up on a windowsill and stare at some kid? Teachers, on the other hand, were different. Once her story ended, it hadn't taken Miss Weaver long to realize that I wasn't paying attention. She called me up to the blackboard to make an example out of me. Since you don't feel the need to listen, why don't you solve a problem on the board instead? She said, sitting down at her desk. My stomach did a flip. The problem would take a minute or two to solve, and being in front of class always made me nervous. How could I expect to do anything when there was a spectacled frog staring me down? I stood to the right of the equation on the board so that I could check on the frog with quick glances. Despite the distraction, I did my best to focus. Halfway through, I saw the frog had moved towards the front of the classroom. I stopped at the window by Miss Weaver's desk. It took me a moment to figure out what it was doing. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was trying to lift the window. Focusing on the problem became almost impossible. I made a mistake and then quickly erased it. The next time I looked over, the window was open. Why should that surprise me? Of course a frog with glasses would also be super strong. The window was only open an inch, but that was enough for it to slip through. I dropped the chalk, and some of my classmates laughed. Bending down to pick it up, I tried convincing myself that when I stood back up, the frog would be gone. It's not there. I just think it's there. When I straightened up, the frog was sitting on Miss Weaver's left shoulder. This was a brave frog. Her head blocked the class from seeing it, and I realized that I was still the only one who could. Either the frog was real, or my imagination had outdone itself. It wasn't all that surprising that Miss Weaver didn't feel it there because the shoulder pads inside her jacket were large and fluffy. I had heard that she rested her head on them like pillows during her breaks. So now that there was a frog sitting on Miss Weaver's shoulders and nobody else knew it, and I was supposed to be doing math. Now that it was closer, I could see the frog better, and it didn't look like some new species of frog to me. It looked like every other frog I had seen, except for the glasses. I wonder if they made contact small enough for a frog, but it wasn't the right time to worry about frog vision. That's a job for a frog eye doctor anyways. I had daydreams all the time when I was drawing, and sometimes I got lost in them. I tried one last time to explain the frog away, but saying it had to be part of an elaborate daydream. I concentrated hard, finished the problem, and put the chalk down. The frog couldn't be real. I shook my head confidently. When I turned to Miss Weaver, I saw the frog look me square in the eyes and nod. A moment later, it disappeared into Miss Weaver's hair. Chapter 2. Soy. I didn't see the frog for the rest of the day. Maybe it stayed in Miss Weaver's hair, or maybe it jumped back through the window when I wasn't looking. All day long I expected her to find it and scream, but she never did. When the bell rang, I ran out of the school onto the side of the yard with the bushes. I'd seen the frog hiding there before, but there was no sign of it. Truthfully, I wouldn't have known what to do with the frog if I had found it. Would I capture it? Would I ask it questions? If I was caught talking to a frog outside of the school, I think people might finally start to remember me, but in a #Don'tTalkToTheFrogKid kind of way. I liked most of the kids in my class just fine, but I was only really close with one. His name was Soy, and he was definitely, without a doubt, my best friend. Soy had kind of reddish blonde hair and a round face. He and I had been friends since preschool, and I knew that I could talk to him about anything. The downside of that was that he also felt that he could talk to me about anything. Since he had 8 older brothers and 2 older sisters, his questions were always about things that I didn't understand. Here's how it would usually go. Soy's brothers would talk about older kid things, and then make fun of him for not getting it. He would ask me about it, and we'd look it up. It only took a few Google searches for me to get banned from using the internet with Soy. The bottom line is that if I was going to tell anyone about the frog, it would be Soy. I decided that our walk home would be the most opportune time. "Did you see anything outside today during math?" I asked Soy as we started walking. "What do you mean? Like in the sky?" he asked, jumping over cracks in the sidewalk. "I mean like right outside the window, like right up against it," I answered. "Like a person?" he asked, still hopping. Soy sat in the row farthest from the window, so it was possible, but unlikely, for someone to walk by without him noticing. "No, it's more like I saw a frog up against the window," I explained. "Awesome," he said. "Yeah, but this frog wasn't normal. It opened the window and it came in the classroom and jumped on Miss Weaver's shoulder. It jumped inside her hair. I spit out. Soy stopped jumping and looked at me. That happened today? He asked. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And when I thought I might be making it up, the frog nodded at me, I said. Soy looked confused. I thought I heard something move in the tree above us, but Soy answered before I heard it again. It nodded at you? I don't think frogs even have necks, do they? Said Soy. This one did, I guess. Most frogs don't wear glasses either, but this did, I explained. All of a sudden, Soy seemed a couple steps further away. The frog was wearing glasses? He asked suspiciously. Yes, I shot back. Why would someone go around putting glasses on frogs? He asked. I don't know, maybe it bought them itself, I replied. Soy was standing at least 20 steps away now. Totally. Well, maybe Miss Weaver will let us look in her hair tomorrow and we can ask the frog where it got them. So I think I'm just gonna head back home today instead of coming over. My mom has lots of stuff for me to do. See you later, Soy said, turning to run away. Soy, I yelled. Stop right there. I can prove the frog is real. How? He asked. It's sitting on your backpack, I said. Chapter 3. Daydreams. Soy had the frog in his hands within seconds. He's always good with outdoorsy stuff like that. His mom was usually busy with his siblings, so Soy was left outside to play a lot. By third grade, he had caught a pet turtle, salamander, and flying squirrel. Unfortunately, his older brothers Rick and Hank stole the squirrel and kept it in their room. Once a week, they played a game where Rick threw the squirrel from the second-story window, and Hank caught it in midair with a trash can as it glided down. Soy tried to get them to stop, but they never listened. The frog didn't put up much of a fight. I started to wonder if it actually wanted to be caught. Do you believe me now? I asked. Soy peeked inside his hands and lifted his head. Well, this frog is wearing glasses, I'll give you that. Both our minds were racing with questions. Let's bring it to my treehouse so we can figure this out, I said. I had built most of the treehouse in the backyard myself. My mom and dad insisted on one of them being there when I used certain tools, but that was about it. Building things always made me feel good afterwards, and I had gotten pretty good at it. The treehouse had been done in for a while, but there were still a few things I wanted to add before winter. When we got there, I told Soy to use the elevator. It was really just a rope with a weighted pulley system, but I called it the elevator anyways. We used it when we needed to carry things we couldn't bring up the ladder. I climbed up and then lowered it down for him. All those years of critter handling had paid off, and he got inside the treehouse without any problem. I shut the door and quadruple locked it, so that the frog couldn't run away, and also to give us some privacy. Okay, Soy, I said. Let him loose. Soy lowered his hands and opened them, letting the frog hop onto the floor of the treehouse. I had a small drafting table, drawings, and bits of wood all over, which provided plenty of places for the frogs to hide. Luckily for us, it didn't move at all. Instead, it looked up to me, and in a loud voice said, "What do you mean, him?" Soy fell backwards from a couch onto his rear. The frog was looking right at me, waiting for an answer, but all I could do was shake my head. It's rude to assume I'm a he, don't you think? I happen to be female, said the frog proudly. Soy was now holding his head with both hands. It can talk, he said in disbelief. Well, now calling me an it after I just told you I was a girl is just plain inconsiderate, Soy, she said. I knelt down closer, looking for anything that might make sense of it all. Maybe the frog was a robot? But nothing about the way it moved was robotic. And would a Made in China sticker really make me feel better? She, had just called my best friend by his first name. So I was so flabbergasted that he was gnawing on his backpack strap, so I doubted that they had met before. I'm sorry, I said to the frog, kneeling down. We didn't mean anything by it. Truly. The frog hopped even closer and said, You've always been kind, then whispered, It's a powerful thing. Remember that." "I will," I said, amazed that I'd just gone from meeting a talking frog to taking advice from a talking frog in a matter of seconds. "But, if you don't mind me asking, how is it that you can talk?" I said. By that point, Soy had half of the backpack strap in his mouth. The frog crooked her head at me slightly. "Do you think that humans are the only animals that can talk?" she asked. I was startled. Was it possible that animals can talk and somehow no one in the world knew about it? Was everything that I thought about animals wrong? I took a seat on the floor, too. Soy spit out his strap. "That's not cool," he said. "I tell my pet iguana all of my secrets. If he can talk, I need to know who he's been talking to." The frog gave out a little laugh. Then she said, "Oh, I'm just kidding. Animals can't talk any more than humans can flap their arms and fly." I was embarrassed, but mostly relieved. "What about some kind of iguana sign language?" asked Soy, still nervous. Ignoring Soy's question, I asked the frog, "How is it that you can talk, I mean?" "For starters, I'm not a frog," she explained. "The only reason that Without any warning, there was a knock on my treehouse door. "What are you up to in there? Why is this door closed?" asked my mom sternly. I searched my brain for an answer that didn't have the word frog in it. "Soy and I we were doing homework and the breeze kept blowing our papers away," I replied. "He's a clever one," the frog whispered to Soy. I gave the frog a signal to be quiet. It may have been the first time in the history of the world that a frog had spoken, but for the time being, she needed to stop. If my mom heard a female voice, she would break down that door, quadruple lock or no. I added another lock every time she broke down the door. A few weeks earlier, Soy had lit a firecracker inside the treehouse and she noticed the smoke. I added the fourth lock that night, but was more sure than ever that the metal was no match for Mom's strength. For that moment, I needed the frog's vocabulary to shrink down to a rivet. "Well, come on inside the house. There's a man from the school board here, and he wants to speak with you," my mother said. Then she lowered a voice and spoke softly into the crack of the door. "And he looks pretty official. He's even wearing a fancy suit with a shiny yellow bow tie. Don't worry, though. He assured me that you've done nothing wrong." "Yellow?" screeched the frog. "What?" asked my mom. "Oh, I said hello," I lied, using the best high-pitched voice I could muster. "Honey, hello usually comes at the beginning of conversations. We're pretty far into this one," she said. "Ah, right. I just sometimes forget when you're supposed to say it," I said nervously. "Oh, I didn't realize. Maybe we can work on that, sweetie," she said, getting even closer to the door, "because that's definitely a problem. Just hurry up and come down, please." I heard my mom climb down the ladder and then watch her go back inside the house. The frog jumped up onto the window, which faced the woods behind my house. I was amazed about how high she could jump. It was immediately clear to me that she could have left any time that she had wanted. "Whatever you do, don't mention me," the frog whispered frantically. "I'll find you later." And with that, she jumped out the window into a bush below. Chapter 4. Tiger Lilies. I sent Soy home and told him not to say a word until we could come up with a plan. He was too frazzled to argue. Soy walked home along the path behind my house across the woods to his, while I headed inside. When I slid the door back open, I saw my mom and the man in the bow tie sitting in our living room. She sat by the fireplace, and he sat closest to the front door. My mom and the man were mid-conversation when I walked in. He looked at me from the corner of his eye, but kept speaking. "They're absolutely beautiful, Miss Calum. I don't believe I've seen Lilium bubliferium that vibrant since my last trip overseas," said the man as he touched the lilies that were on the table between them. "Oh, you're too nice," said my mom with a giggle. My mom wasn't known for giggling, but flowers were one of her favorite things in the world. She filled the house with them whenever she could. The most that my dad would say about it was that flake flowers cost less. "Does your son have an appreciation for flowers as well?" the man said, turning to look at me. His blonde hair was pressed firmly against the top of his head, and his pale skin looked almost shiny. The thing that stood out most, though, was his toothy grin. I felt uneasy. I wished that I was still talking to the frog instead. "Ah, there you are. Come have a seat and say hello to Mr. my mother said, stopping for a moment. Reem, he finished for her, and it's a pleasure to meet you, young man. Hello, I said. Good job, my mom whispered happily. That's exactly where hello goes. Mr. Reem is from the school board, she said louder, and he's here to... Once again, she wasn't sure how to finish her sentence. I'm here to speak with you about Miss Weaver's class, he interjected. We've begun an initiative where we, the board members, speak directly with students to learn more about their experiences in the school system. We'd like to have an open dialogue between the administration and the children. I think that's just wonderful, said my mom. She was smiling ear to ear, looking for me to agree. I gave a nod, then I waited for someone else to speak. Miss Calum, we found that the students tend to be more free and honest with their feelings when the parents can't hear. I assure you, I've been trained in creating an atmosphere where students can speak their mind without fear of unjust punishment, said Mr. Reem. I see, said my mom. She turned to me and spoke in her usual kind voice. I'm going to be right here in the kitchen if you need anything, sweetie. Remember that you can be honest with Mr. Reem, and nothing bad will happen, okay? I nodded and watched my mom leave for the kitchen. I looked at Mr. Reem's clothing. He wore a blue suit with a yellow bow tie. It wasn't a regular yellow, though, so I could see why my mom had mentioned it. As he moved, the light reflected off of it in every direction. It didn't move like clothes usually do. In fact, it didn't move at all. I also noticed just how tall Mr. Reem was. He was taller than my mom, even when he was sitting down. Has anything strange happened at school in the past couple of days? He asked right away. I shook my head hard and fast. You can tell me. I'm here to help, he said in a friendly voice. You see, I didn't tell your mom this because I didn't want to worry her. Now Mr. Reem leaned in closer. His mouth looked larger by the second. I was almost positive that I could eat a whole sandwich in one bite. There's he said, pausing, person who has been bothering students. Some little birdies told me that perhaps they've been bothering you. He gave the largest smile I'd ever seen. 2 sandwiches at least. I knew deep down that he meant the frog. That's why she acted so funny when he heard about the bow tie. Well, what does this person look like? I asked shyly. That's the tricky part, he replied. This person likes to disguise themselves in different ways that might even seem impossible. He was only a foot away now. 3 sandwiches and a side of fries, I decided. He continued, there may even be disguised as an animal. My eyes got wide. Mr. Reem's got small. You've seen them, Mr. Reem said, trying to hide his excitement. I shook my head. I didn't say that. You did, I said defensively. But you have, haven't you? He said sympathetically. Tell me what happened. It's for your own safety. I didn't know what to believe. What's so dangerous about her anyways? I asked. The moment I said it, I wished that I could take it back, that I could grab the words out of midair and zip them right back into my mouth, but that's not how words work. Her, he said. I couldn't look at him. I'd said too much. He spoke sharply in a whisper. So it's true. She has come to see you. Tell me why. I shook my head. Why did she choose to reveal yourself to you? Tell me, he demanded. It was nothing, I answered just by myself. I was just... You were just what? He prodded. I was confused, but I knew that I did not want to tell this man anything more, and I was not going to make the same mistake twice. I was just catching frogs in the woods with Soy, and we didn't know it was a special frog when we caught it, I swear, and she asked us to let her go, so we did, I said in one breath. Mr. Reem sat back in his seat and listened to me ramble on. And she made me promise not to tell anyone. Am I in trouble? I asked, pretending to cry. I had learned how to fake cry the year before when I tried out for a small part in a school play. As it turned out, the role of Weeping Willow wasn't even a speaking part. It's just a tree. No crying required. Still, after 40 minutes of standing up on stage, not being allowed to move, I cried a little anyways. No, he hissed. You've just disappointed me. I thought for a moment you were the... My mom walked in smiling, with a vase in her hand. Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought you might enjoy seeing my latest... She stopped when she saw me. What are you two talking about in here? She asked, a bit concerned. Oh, Miss Calum, your son and I were just... Mr. Reem sputtered. Why is he crying? my mom asked more forcefully. She rushed to my side to console me. It's nothing, Mr. Ream pleaded. Sometimes these talks can be emotional, and if you wouldn't mind my asking just a few more questions. The tears were flowing more freely now. I had become the weepiest willow in the world. I would mind, she said firmly, and if you'd like to keep your job, you'll leave right now. Mr. Ream straightened his jacket and grabbed a briefcase from behind the couch. Yes, of course. Thanks for your time, he said. He opened the door and turned to me. Be sure to let me know if your story changes, he said with an unfriendly glare. My mom put her arm around my shoulder. Out, she shouted. I spent the rest of the night listening to my mom speak on the phone with people from the school district. Apparently, Mr. Ream was highly regarded, but my mom didn't care. She was beyond angry. She yelled at some of the school people and even threatened to call the police once. By bedtime, she seemed a little calmer. Whatever Mr. Ream wanted with that frog, it wasn't good. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let him get to her. The next morning, my mom gave me an extra long hug and apologized for the 10th time for letting Mr. Ream in the house. I told her for the 10th time that it was all right. Soy and I met in front of the house on the way to school, as usual. I hadn't spoke to him since the treehouse, but it was immediately clear that he'd gotten over the backpack chewing phase. How do you think that it learned to talk? How could she talk? He asked, without waiting for an answer. He continued, and how did it know my name? I don't know, same as you, I said honestly. What about the dude with the bow tie? He asked excitedly. His name is Mr. Ream. Soy, he knew about her, I said. About the frog? Soy asked. Yeah, he said that he was looking for someone who could disguise themselves as an animal. She was right to warn us. There was definitely something off about him, I said. You didn't tell him anything, right? Asked Soy. I looked down at the ground. I accidentally let on that I knew her. You did what? Soy said in shock. I didn't mean to. It came out by accident. And then Mr. Ream grilled me on why she had come to talk to me. Apparently it's a big deal what she did. So what'd you do? Draw him a picture of it and tell him everything? Are you recording this conversation for him right now? If you're wearing a wire, you have to tell me, Soy said angrily. No, quit it, Soy, I said. I told Mr. Ream that we were catching frogs, found her by mistake, and let her go. Oh, okay, that's not bad, actually. Thanks, I said with my head still hanging. And if he looks into it at all, the story will check out, since I do love catching frogs. I should catch a few extra this week, just to be safe. So what now? Soy asked. I really don't know, but we need to find out why that frog's here and why Mr. Ream is after her, I answered. I'm in, said Soy. I'd take a frog in glasses over a man in a bow tie any day. I smiled. It felt good to have Soy on my side. He lowered his voice a little and shyly. If we do see it again, could you tell it that I've actually been really good about calling it a she? Sure thing, I said, promising to lie to a frog for my best friend.